Hey everyone, and welcome to our new segment, Rhyno's Regulars. We might tweak the name, but the long and short of it is that we are going to be covering topics that arise in the reptile community. Some of this will be really cool stuff from other channels, maybe new snakes that they show off. We're also going to be talking about stuff that is somewhat scary, stuff that you need to pay attention to. And unfortunately, that's going to be a majority of this episode. A while back, I talked about USARK and the Lacey Act Amendments. I tacked this on to the end of a video and give it just a quick little bit of why you should care and where you should go for information. Right now, we're entering a critical state on this. It's about to be reconciled, and I'll get into what that means later. It's happening even worse in Florida right now in a technically separate thing. And we're gonna get into that too, and why you should care about all of this. But first, let's talk about a couple of really cool things. So over on Dave Kaufman's Reptile Adventures YouTube channel, he's been uploading a lot of videos from his recent trip to Africa. The primary objective of his trip to Africa was to film a movie about ball pythons. He has been releasing a lot of content about other reptiles over there as well. The Gavoom viper, which I think is the coolest reptile that is venomous, which I'll never own, unfortunately. There's a lot of other cool content from this, so please go check it out because it is really, really cool. I love watching his videos when they come out, and the ball python video should be releasing very shortly. He did say sometime here, I believe at the end of July, which we're approaching. Over on Chris Hardwick's reptile channel, he actually hatched out a bunch of ball pythons this week, including some scaleless ball pythons, which you haven't seen those. They are real trippy looking. They do require a little bit of extra care, but they look so cool. It changes everything about what the morphs normally look like. But that's not even what I personally think was the coolest one. He actually hatched out a blue-eyed leucistic that is Paradox, and it is so cool. Paradox can't really be replicated, but it doesn't matter. That's cool because it's so unique. So if you take a look here, this is a bamboo lesser. It could have calico in it too, he said, because those were the pairings. What makes this so cool is that a blue-eyed leucistic is supposed to just be a white snake. And unfortunately, while those are really cool, that's the end of the project. And nobody's ever figured out how to put really any pattern really into a all-white blue-eyed leucistic snake. So when you get a paradox like this, it shows you a what if. Like, what if somebody could get this snake? And you might think like, well, that exists, it's pied. But this is a little different. Pied, while random, is a bit different from this. It's not as starkly white. It doesn't really affect their face typically in most of them. So when you get something like this, it's just kind of unique. And then also, you know, the blue eyes too. Let's get into what this video is primarily going to be about. And it's something dangerous, and it's something that you need to act on. If you are watching this, you probably like reptiles. That is under threat. A lot of people think, like myself, ball pythons probably are safe for now. But there's a lot of times in history where we say, well, we're not gonna do anything because we're safe. That has proven historically to be a bad decision. Just because they're not coming for you now doesn't mean that they won't later. So you need to care. You absolutely need to care about what's happening federally, and you need to care about what's happening in Florida. While we were at our local reptile show, which we showcased in a small music montage, we caught up with Natalie. Natalie's awesome. I see her at almost every show. She's always at the USARK table, and she'll tell you everything you want to know about that. So we actually did a quick little interview with her, which we're going to show off right now.
Right now there's a big bill called the Lacey Act Amendments that, if it were to pass into law, would prohibit the transport of any exotic animal, not just reptiles, but any exotic animal from crossing state lines. And in this bill, they're considering any animal outside of cats, dogs, and livestock as exotic. So whether you have a bearded dragon, or a parakeet, or a ferret, or even a betta fish, you will not be able to travel across state lines with that animal, which is terrible for the average reptile keeper that may move, as the average American is known to move 11 times within their lifetime, but also military that get bumped around to all corners of the country or all corners of the world and may need someone outside of the state that they were originally living in to care for their animals, would no longer be able to do that. But it would also affect businesses. Small pet shops that get their stock from out of state would no longer be able to do that. And it would even concern conservation efforts, as zoos, who often interchange animals across the country, for breeding purposes would only be allowed to do that with other zoos within their state, which would heavily concern conservation efforts. So the Lacey Act Amendments are terrible for everyone, whether you're an average pet keeper or a zoologist or a business owner. The Lacey Act Amendments really are not good for the pet industry as a whole. And of course, they sneakily edged this into a much larger bill called the America Competes Act, which is a 600-plus page bill, and they snuck in these 4 pages of Lacey Act Amendments last minute, so it would pass without anyone even realizing it's there.
I think that hits the nail on the head. So the Lacey Act Amendments are something that is sandwiched in to the America Competes Act. That bill is effectively killed. Now you might think, great, we won, right? No. That bill was killed because the Senate said that they're not going to pass that one, because it passed something very similar. Basically, the Senate passed a bill that would effectively target our technology capabilities in America. You might wonder, what does that have to do with reptiles? And that sadly is the point. These bills are allowed to be sandwiched and stapled into something that has nothing to do with it. This has to do with America's ability to manufacture cars and nanochips and other such technology so that we can compete with other nations abroad. Whether you feel about this bill in whatever way, it doesn't matter. Those don't need to be there. They have nothing to do with technology. So I said that this bill was dead. But in effect, it's having parts picked from it and being Frankensteined into the bill that the Senate passed. So I guess a nicer word for that would be reconciliation. So they're trying to merge the two bills, and effectively this is why it's important that you act now, because Congress is in session now, and they want to get this done before August, before they have another recess, because they are concerned with how things look, because they want to get reelected, because that's happening this year. They're going to rush now. That's the other problem. They're going to rush, which means they're going to forget about little things. So one of the biggest things it would do, and what I think is the most dangerous thing, is it would give the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a federal agency, the complete anonymity to pass whitelist.
The whitelist, which is also part of these Lacey Act Amendments, it gives Fish and Wildlife the power to deem anything injurious or invasive overnight without any due process or voting. So say Fish and Wildlife over in Arizona, where it's very hot and very dry, if Fish and Wildlife was like, oh, well, that's the type of climate that bearded dragons thrive in Australia. So if one happened to maybe possibly someday escape, it could thrive and become injurious to the ecosystem. So why not just ban them before that ever happens? And it would create a blanket ban across the country, no matter what the climate.
The difference between a whitelist and a blacklist is that if a species put on a blacklist, that species is banned. So they would have to research a certain species. They'd have to have a reason to target a species to put it on the list. What a whitelist does is it puts the species on the list that are allowed. They don't know any of these. There are so many species of animals in the world. Millions. There could be just one little distinction. Are they going to know the difference between a leopard gecko and a fat-tailed gecko? I don't think so. They'll both look at them and say they're the same thing, but they're not. There's so many other species that I haven't heard of that plenty of people are working with right now that they haven't heard of. I can guarantee you that they're going to leave things off that make no sense to leave, that to not have on a allowed list. This is a problem because it's a federal act. Something that happens in Hawaii or in southern Florida or in the desert isn't going to affect me in the north, where almost everything dies in the winter. A ball python, if released in northwest Indiana, would probably maybe survive until, it might even survive through October if it didn't get too bad. But once the snows started to hit, it's gone. It makes no sense to create a blanket law over the entire United States, which is so enormous that you can probably find an area in it that every species on the planet could survive in. you might be thinking that, I actually agree with some of this. I think that invasive species are bad, and so do I. I think that anybody who definitely purposefully releases animals into the wild, that should be a criminal act. So let's play devil's advocate for a second. Most of what they're saying on paper, it sounds like something that someone who's into conservation should want. We don't want these animals out in the wild. I think it's important that you get someone in their mindset so that you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. So explore that, find out, because a lot of these people, I think you're going to find, are being misled. It's really easy if I tell you right now, hey, there's Burmese pythons that are destroying the natural habitat in the Everglades, the beautiful Everglades in Florida. We gotta stop that. There's iguanas that are causing menaces and eating local wildlife. We gotta stop that. So it makes sense that somebody being told this would believe it and say, yeah, I agree. I think that that's bad. So I think it's important to realize that just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean that you should attack them. It's too commonplace right now, especially in our country, that when people disagree with other people, that they just assume that they are the enemy. Talk with people. You probably have friends that might think this way, that might think that it's good to help the environment and that this is good for the environment, the Lacey Acts. Their thinking might not necessarily be wrong, but the way that the Lacey Act goes about it is bad. But I'm pretty passionate about this. It's real easy as a ball python breeder to say, well, they'll never come for America's most popular reptile, right? That's hog shit. Leave it in. It's hog shit. They will come for it eventually. They will. They'll say it can survive in Hawaii because they've already banned it in Hawaii. Wait for it to happen to Florida. Wait for Florida and Hawaii to then influence other states. Or if this bill passed, it won't matter because since it's banned there, it's banned everywhere. That makes no sense. You think a ball python's gonna last 2 seconds in Alaska? No, I don't. And there are Alaskan breeders. They're probably awesome. I can't imagine how they handle that, but they do because they love their reptiles. And if you love your reptiles too, you need to do something. So what can you do?
So USARK is the only organization in the U.S. that fights for the rights of reptile keepers. Right now there's a lot of bad legislation going around. A lot of the more extreme animal rights groups have their hands in politicians' pockets to push bills that would negatively impact the reptile community. And USARK is the only organization in the U.S. right now with the resources to step in and mitigate any government overreach. So everyone needs to kind of pitch in. USARK is amazing at providing all of their resources on their website, usark.org. To easily find your state senators and representatives. They have phone numbers, emails, addresses for snail mail, to let them know to take these Lacey Act amendments out of this larger America Competes Act bill.
So USARK has a YouTube channel. It is criminally undersubscribed. Please, if you're not subscribed, go subscribe because they can tell you everything that you want to know just so that you are informed. Information is the key to success. In the description of every single video, it simply says step 1. Click, boom, done, there it is. You can also find this on their website as the very, very first things. It just says America Competes Act, read more. You click read more, you do easy alert, USARK alert, boom, there I am. Now you might think, okay, what is this? So you fill in the requested information with your details and click send email. Their system's going to automatically locate your federal legislators using your address that you used in the fill out, and you can include a personal message. They even allow you to upload a video and such sort. If you want to get a little more creative, there's lists on here too with their contact information. You can copy paste this and change it up and send it to them. I did that actually, and I used it as a basis. I ended up changing nearly the entire body of the email and near the end of it, but this makes it super simple. This takes no time at all. I did this in seconds. Click, done. The only thing they ask you is to please remember to keep it civil and professional. They're not going to listen if you call them names. They're not going to listen if you call them all sorts of stuff. Remember, these politicians, you can view and think of them whatever you want, but they don't understand this. They're acting on the case of lobbyists and such like that. They're going to listen to you as long as you are not acting like a fool, and then you sound intelligent, and you sound like you're passionate, and you sound like you can vote, and you're not a criminal. You might not think that they're listening, but they are, and whether it's for their own personal ambitions or not, once they speak it into the world and they make people aware, that's important. Remember what I said, a lot of these senators have no idea the entire extent of what's in this bill. They know there's a lot, and it makes a lot of them upset because there's just so much in it that it's too much. It doesn't even have anything to do with technology. But when they speak it out loud, suddenly that particular issue, at least, becomes important. And they say, well, what does it have to do with this? Why is it in there? Throw it away. At least that one. They'll catch it. And Representative Harrell out of New Mexico did just that.
Also snuck into the bill are several amendments to the Lacey Act, which the Natural Resources Committee never considered, that threatened American jobs. These provisions will be detrimental to the American industries such as aquaculture, which are already highly regulated businesses.
So it's important to keep doing this so that another one of these instances brings up, so that they say it again, so that they don't put these acts in this bill. No matter how you feel, this affects you if you love reptiles. Even if you're not into reptiles, if you love fish, if you love birds, this affects you. If you love pets, this affects you. So please support USARK, please be informed, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.